Coming up on the other side of this, a closer look at the wage gap and leadership gap when it comes to women and men in the workforce. We'll talk about it. It's a September jobs report showing women and men are nearly on par in terms of unemployment rate, but that does not show the full picture in terms of leadership and maybe more importantly, the wage gap. Our next guest is the author of Likeable Badass. I like just saying that on the air. How women get the success they deserve. She's also the co-author of a recent New York Times opinion piece with Adam Grant titled Kamala Harris is doing something brilliant up there on the tightrope. Joining us right now is Alison Fragale, research psychologist and professor at the Keenan Flagler Business School at UNC. Why don't you actually, let's go straight to that op-ed and explain it. What do you mean by that tightrope and being brilliant up there?
Yeah, it's the balance between showing strength and showing warmth, assertiveness and warmth. And that's something that we all need to do to manage our status, to be well respected. But it's well known that it's been harder for women to be able to find that space, to be able to do both over time. And so that tightrope is being able to convey that balance simultaneously of, I know what I'm doing, I'm strong, and I also care about you.
When you look at, we were just talking about the unemployment rate earlier, and obviously Friday, the big jobs report came out. We were saying unemployment, men and women, very similar. Wages still quite different. Why do you think that is? And what do you think needs to happen or not about it?
Yeah, I mean, the Census Bureau just showed that for the first time in over 20 years, the wage gap got a little bit wider rather than narrowed. And I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One is women entering the workforce in entry-level positions, so they're not compensated as highly as more senior positions. And then our challenge is getting women to advance and be able to move up to on par and parity with men. The Women in the Workforce report that just came out showed a somewhat promising increase in women in C-suite positions, which was 29%, up from probably 17% a decade ago, except that a lot of that growth has actually come from adding positions to the C-suite, like human resources, legal, data, chief data officer, and it's probably not a sustainable path to growth to continue to add positions. And so when we look at those challenges of why aren't we closing the wage gap, and why aren't we having parity and representation, one of the variables that I try to shine a spotlight on is this notion of status, of being respected. And that's critically important to our ability to advance, because if we're not well respected, generally people don't want to promote us. And one of the challenges that women have is that on average, they are granted less respect than men. And so what I help people do is to bring status into the narrative and say, we need to be, as women, making sure that we can walk the unfair tightrope in ways that get us the respect we deserve. And we need to be sure.
But what does that mean? How do you do that then?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, a lot of things that we don't control affect our status. But what we also see from the science is that status is affected even more by how you show up. So we can control it, even though we don't all start at equal playing fields. So every time we can take an action that can convince our audience, because status is purely judged by the opinions of our audience, that we are very capable and we care about people other than ourselves, we have done the most controllable thing we can do to convince our audience that we are deserving of respect. And that can be small things. So with our analysis of Kamala Harris, we were looking at communication style, like what emotions do you express? What words do you use? Those things can convey, I know what I'm doing and I care about you. But also other more substantive things that we can do, like giving advice.
Alison, can I ask you this? We were talking about also talking about DEI, and interestingly, obviously today is October 7th, a year after the Hamas attacks, which led to all sorts of debate inside educational institutions and large corporations about DEI, free speech, and all sorts of other things. I wonder whether you think that DEI ultimately helps or undermines the arguments around respect.
That's a really good
question.
Sort
of a complicated one, right?
Yeah, it is a complicated question. I think that generally I would say I think it's helpful in that respect is everything that people know about us that contributes to how much we're respected comes from one of two places. The things that we say about ourselves and put out into the world, and the things that other people say about us, often when we're not around. And I think that what DEI efforts do in their best version is try to help other people understand the role that they can play in building other people's status. And I think to the extent that it raises awareness of the fact that I have some influence over your status and everybody else's by how I present them to the world, and I have a lot of control over that, that's a very positive thing. But I agree with you, it is a very complicated question.
Alison, it's a longer conversation with many more questions. We hope to have them again with you in the future. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you.